Good afternoon, everybody. It's 1:30, so we'll crack on. Stuart. It's a lovely warm day, and if any of you gentlemen wish to remove your jackets, do so, because those that have already got them off have removed them. So, yeah. Derek, can you mute your microphone, please? Right. Welcome to the Environment Select meeting of today, July somewhere the 18th. And first of all, can we have any apologies, please, Simon?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Charles McGrath, Councillor Dr Brian Matthew MP, who's being substituted by Councillor Poleman, Councillor Tom Rounds, and we're joined remotely by Councillor Derek Walters.
Okay, and everybody else looks like they're here, so we will carry on with the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 20th of March and the 4th of June, because we didn't manage to get the minutes signed off on the last previous one because there were a couple of things we had to add on to it. But are we all happy now for those minutes to be approved? Everyone's happy, all in favour? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Then I'll sign them off at the end. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of disclosable interests or dispensations as granted by the Standards Committee? And there are none. Moving swiftly on to item 4. My announcements. Well, the agenda pack for today's meeting again includes a list of standard scrutiny questions. I encourage members to make use of the document and hope this will prompt some questions that we might otherwise not have thought of. We may, I'll just check with Councillor C, we may need to move the speed list group forward because he needs to attend another meeting. Jonathan, are you in a rush or are you okay to stay on? You're happy to stay? Okay, right. Okay, then we'll go back into, we'll stay in the same order then. 5, public participation. And it appears that we've had no one come. Okay, so now we'll turn to the main agenda. Just remind members and officers that this meeting is being broadcast live to the public on the internet and recorded for the view of the Council's YouTube channel. Please keep your committee members, keep your forthcoming discussions to statements to a minimum, you know, trying to keep things out of being parochial. And I know that perhaps Warminster, there might be a little bit of parochial in there because it's involving your particular area, but it's a nice sunny day, so don't keep us at the crease too long. So we'll go to number 6, the Wiltshire Cultural Strategy 2024-2030. Now, this item went to the Cabinet on Tuesday, was reported on Tuesday, and we'd obviously not had time to look at it. So this is on pages 31 to 68 of your agenda pack. Councillor Richard Clew is not here today, but we do have David Redfern, we have Tamsin, we have Mr. Pritchard. So welcome to you three, and I think we have Ed Pooley as well sat somewhere. So I think we'll move straight on to this report, and I know you're leading it, Dave. So
thanks very much, Chair, and yeah, good afternoon, committee. Yes, delighted to be sat here now presenting this item, to be quite honest. This has been quite a journey. It was almost just over 2.5 years ago when I became director, and it's worth just noting for the committee that we did not have an arts and culture team back then. It still had to be reformed. It was part of savings measures that took place previously, but with conversations with the leader, I was adamant that we needed some capacity to kind of drive this work forward. We fended off Salisbury, who have an entirely brilliant cultural strategy themselves, but we wanted to be clear that as Wiltshire Council officers, we serve the entire county, and were keen that we developed a cultural strategy that did just that. So it was really the back end of last year when we had capacity in place and the go-ahead of all those concerned to, at breakneck speed, produce a strategy that I was very, very keen for it to be an enabling document, because as you can see, this is my arts and culture team, and they do other things in their day jobs as well. But the person driving it forward has definitely been the lady to my left, Tamsin Early. So I'm going to hand over to her now because I've got other stuff to do today, and let her take you through it, and then we'll take some questions. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. To start with, I just want to give you an overview of our presentation today. We'll look at the background to the strategy in the introduction, why we need a cultural strategy, the progress we have made, the visions and principles, details of the strategy's themes, the next steps, and finally take any questions. In terms of the background of the development of the cultural strategy, Wiltshire Council has not had a cultural strategy prior to this point. The work to develop this strategy has been part funded by Arts Council England. At the end of 2023, we were tasked with delivering the strategy by the summer of 2024. The brief of the strategy focused on 5 themes of identity, health and well-being, community, economy, and tourism. And it was to be an enabling tool that was a living, active strategy that was owned by the whole county to support the delivery of arts and culture and the wider benefits that it can bring. So why have a cultural strategy? Culture is who we are as people. It's a way of how we relate to each other, connecting through films, music, events, and so forth. It impacts on many parts of life, and therefore actually having a cultural strategy is important. It can have a positive effect on numerous areas, including enhancing the county's natural heritage and landscape, supporting the public health prevention agenda using arts and culture to aid people's mental health and well-being, to support the place-shaping agenda, creating resilient and vibrant communities through events, activities, and the implementation of public art. It can support the development of children and young people through cultural education and can highlight pathways of creative opportunities and careers. And supporting the arts and cultural sector through this strategy can help to develop a strong economy through potential employment opportunities in the creative sector, and it can also feed into a strong tourist economy. So how have we got to this point? This slide gives you an overview of the timescale of this development. As you can see, a great deal of work has been undertaken in approximately 5 months, and I'll just give you a whistle-stop tour of the progress that's been made. So in January, we undertook a tender process, and we appointed FEI as consultants to help us develop the strategy. FEI, as an organisation, are very experienced in delivering cultural strategies for local authorities. We had an inception meeting with them to develop the project plan. February, we undertook a great deal of research and review of existing provision to complete an extensive mapping analysis. We held key stakeholder one-to-one conversations, both internally with council leadership and teams like Public Health and Economy and Regeneration, to name but a few, and also external organisations, including the council's arts partners and English Heritage, Natural England, and Wiltshire Community Foundation, and many, many more. In March, we held 3 consultation workshops for the arts organisations and professionals. There was an online survey for the wider general public, and we held a specific workshop for town and parish councils. In April, we began the development of the emerging themes from all the consultation. We undertook a detailed SWOT analysis, and we held a workshop with the heads of service. At the end of the month, we had another key stakeholder workshop to discuss those emerging themes. In May, the strategy and the council action plan was developed, and we undertook the preparation of the various council reports. And now in June, the strategy is undertaking a journey through the corporate process. So it has been before Cabinet this week, and we are presenting to you here today, and it will go to full council next week on the 24th. And then looking ahead, you can see the work that will follow on from full council, but I will address that in more detail under the next step slide. So what does all this work mean? Well, it has shaped the content of the cultural strategy. We've developed a strong vision. It is one where Wiltshire is a vibrant beacon of culture, creating an arts for all ethos, a place of creativity and celebration with a connected arts and cultural sector, a place where culture supports people's health and happiness, a place where young people and creative enterprise can flourish and succeed, a place that supports the development of distinctive and vibrant places stimulating economic growth, and a place that ensures culture and its benefits is at the centre of every town, village and landscape. This vision is underpinned by three key principles: empowering others, taking an enabling approach, working in partnership, co-creating, and making things easier for independent action. The environment, using arts and culture to care and enhance Wiltshire's beautiful natural landscape and address climate change. Yes, that's a massive challenge, but mindful that arts and culture can address important issues and affect key change. For example, last year's Post Office TV drama. And finally, access, the steps we can take to work towards a universal cultural entitlement for the whole county and ensure that all opportunities are designed to be inclusive and accessible to all. An ambitious vision, certainly, but one that puts arts, culture and creativity at the heart of Wiltshire's economic and social future. So the themes on this slide are the building blocks of the strategy that will support the delivery of that vision. As I've said at the briefing stage, we had 5 themes: identity, health and well-being, community, economy and tourism. However, through stakeholder conversations and the engagement process, the themes have increased to 7, with the additions of communicate and connect. I'm mindful that there's quite a lot of information on this slide and you can read it for yourself, but it indicates the aim of each theme and some key activities that can drive its delivery. So we have identity, supporting Wiltshire to become a national leader in connecting people to the natural landscape through culture. Health and well-being, using creative endeavour and cultural activity to ensure people live full, healthy and enriched lives. Community, establish distinctive, sustainable cultural hubs and vibrant high streets through a year-round calendar of events, activities and festivals. Economy, support opportunities for people to develop the cultural and creative skills they need to flourish in life. Establish Wiltshire as a place where creative and cultural enterprise can grow. Tourism, support Wiltshire as a place where everyone is invited, providing something for everyone in its rich natural landscape, rich natural beauty and a vibrant cultural offer. And then just taking communicate and connect together, how the strategy can make positive connections to create a thriving cultural ecosystem that in turn will support the aims of these themes, and that it will be driven through the creation of a county-wide strategic cultural partnership that will take the strategy forward and deliver on the aims and actions. So what are the next steps? Well, right now, as I mentioned under the progress slide, we're undertaking the corporate endorsement and approval process. So before you today, and then this week, Cabinet endorsed the strategy with a recommendation that full council adopt it at next week's meeting on the 24th. After this process, we will work to get the final cultural strategy designed and produced, and initial conversations with the designer have already taken place to ensure this work is delivered efficiently. As I mentioned, the main delivery mechanism for the strategy will be the cultural partnership. Therefore, a key next step will be the development of that partnership. Also of importance, and especially when thinking about the strategy as an enabling tool, will be the development of the Council's Cultural Forum, bringing together key officers from across the organisation to help shape and input into the strategy's delivery. And finally, we plan to launch the strategy this autumn at the first Cultural Assembly. So I'd like to thank you for your time this afternoon and would welcome any comments or questions you may have.
The hands are shooting up here, that's good, which is good. I'll just ask a question from the chair. What extra council resources do you think will be needed to deliver the strategy, and where will they come from if we need extra resources? David, thank you.
Yeah, I'll take that, Chair, if I may. I think the resources in the main are sat here today, Chair. And as Tamsin has already pointed out, and as I said right at the start of the presentation, we knew because of the limited capacity, this definitely had to be an enabling document. And the mechanisms that we put in place as part of the strategy aim to pull stakeholders together so we can share the delivery of this. What we have found as part of this process is Wiltshire's got a rich diversity of cultural activity. People who are very keen to drive culture and art in all its forms, and people who want to partake as well. So it doesn't feel like it'll take much to engage people, to engage stakeholders, to assist them in the delivery of this. I hope that goes somewhere to answer that question.
Yeah, that's a little way there. So, okay, we'll get the other questions in. So I'm going that side, then I come in over there. I've got 2 there, 3 there. So Stuart Palmer to start with, then Mel.
Sorry, I'm going to sound very cynical here, as I sometimes do. I was involved in one of the data gathering sessions, and I think you've gone out and you've found out what's going on, and shaped that into part of the strategy. But I'm finding it very difficult to understand what will have changed before and after the strategy. I think the only tangible output I can see is that you'll have created networks and people will be talking to each other a bit more fluidly, but without any level of budget, I think it's almost, I don't understand what the paper document at the end's going to achieve, if I'm being hyper cynical. And second point, looking through it, one of the things I get from a lot of people in Wiltshire is the lack of good theatres in Wiltshire. And I did a word search on theatre, and it just turned up once as a company. And so I need convincing of the value, is what I'm saying from a cynical perspective.
Sure, and I think that's in some respects a fair comment, because we are being ambitious with what we've set out to do here, because it has got very little financial resource, if any at all. So I get your point there, but the idea behind this is, as a network. And there is power in the collective to be able to work through some of these issues. And in terms of delivering things, what I've always been keen to do, Councillor Palmer, is have action plans behind it. So you'll see that from 2024 to 2030, we are laying out clearly what we set out to do.
In there's lots of seek and support and investigate type actions, which I find difficult to quantify as the value of.
Okay, point taken.
Councillor Jacob.
Sorry, not working. Yeah, sorry. I've got similar comments. I know I already said to you before the meeting began, there's lots of initiating and supporting and creating groups of people, and I can see the value in bringing all those stakeholders together. But again, without funding, once they come up with some great ideas, and the Youth Forum, for example, was one that drew my eye, they're going to have these great ideas, and where can they take them? Who's going to fund it? All public sector bodies, schools, colleges, all of those people are also going to be short of budget. And I know before the meeting you said to me, obviously there's area board funding, and it mentions in here trying to target that. But the area board funding is limited. And like there's a youth fund, is there a possibility to support the strategy by having a cultural fund as part of the area board, so that maybe funds could be focused around cultural activities or promotion? Because otherwise we're raising everybody's expectations, and then we've got nowhere to go. And I'm totally supportive of all of the aims and objectives. I think it's fabulous that we're going to have a cultural strategy, but we need to get to the end and for people to feel that it has made a difference. So I don't want to be glass half empty. I just want to say the practicalities are, it's quite difficult to put on arts projects without money. And we had a recent incident at our area board where an application was turned down, which was about an arts project, which sounded to me fabulous, but to some of the people making the decision sounded expensive. But actually it's quite a lot of money for artists. They're normally self-employed, they're normal people, normally small businesses working on their own. And how do we support them if we really want to have the cultural offer or whatever, I can't remember how exact cultural entitlement that we're trying to get there. So we have to put our money where our mouth is in a way, and that's not your decision. That's about, can we lobby to have more money in next year's budget so that we really can make the strategy buzz.
I think part of this as well, if I may come back on that, Councillor Jacobs, is there seems to be a bit of feedback there. It's all right, no problem. Looking at your particular example and the patch that you're working in, we think Alan Wright at Town Hall Arts is I know he's not getting any younger, but it certainly does not diminish his passion and his drive. So the part that we feel we're going to play, and we've made great steps on this over the last couple of years, is engaging with our arts partners and where we can help and support as a council. Because one part of this as well, and this is my firm belief, and I've shared this with Richard and I've shared this with various officers across the council, is that the council can do a lot more to enable cultural activity. I was rang by Cricklade Town Council a couple of weeks ago, and I would challenge any town councils to get in touch, and we have got the mechanisms now to do something about this. But they were, and again, everybody has their priorities, but what we're doing is raising the profile here across the council with our officer colleagues. And it perhaps doesn't seem obvious how people can enable as part of some of the other services across the council. And I'm not making any aspirations because I've got some fantastic colleagues across the council, but let me give you this one specific example. They were struggling for a road closure. So I could go to the Director of Highways and within a day or two, that road closure issue was, and I think moving forwards, we aim to raise awareness in officers at the part that they do play in enabling cultural activity. So and what you've both just said there was a theme that absolutely came through when we went out to consultation. As you expect, it's not rocket science. There's not a lot of money out there. The Arts Council's not got a lot of money either. They're very much backing what we're doing here. We feel they're a really strong partner, as are our arts partners within the county. But I have a little bit, as you would expect as director, more hope that we'll be able to deliver something really tangible.
Okay, Councillor Wheeler on that side.
No, I haven't. I've pressed the wrong button. Sorry. I hate to be cynical, but I was in charge of culture in 2009 on Cabinet. And what I would suggest is you go back and look at the actual direct financial support Wiltshire Council provided at that time, which I think this is a very good document. It's the sort of document I've read many times. It's full of aspirations. The one question I wrote at the back of it is budget. We were providing proper support, real support to, and I scribbled them down, to Salisbury Museum, Devizes Museum, Salisbury Arts Centre and Salisbury Theatre, which have now combined. We were helping the Chalk Valley Festival. We were helping the Marlborough Jazz Festival. We supported the Victoria County History Project. We no longer do. We supported the Wiltshire Historic Buildings Trust. We no longer do. We had councillors sitting on the board of Salisbury Theatre, which we should do. We had councillors sitting on the boards of both the Devizes Museum and the Salisbury Museum to provide a direct input. We took those places because we as a council were actually providing, I'm not saying huge financial support, but actually quite significant support, and support in kind when they were applying, for example, for lottery grants at both Salisbury and Devizes. We were supplying a lot of support. We supplied a lot of support to Devizes Museum in desperately trying to find a store for objects found which are multifarious in this county and cost an awful lot of money to store. I mean, we're chucking away Roman bricks by the thousand because there are a lot of them. What I'm saying is, I think this is all very good. It's all very long. I did sit on Arts Council Board Southwest for a while, and it reminds me of an Arts Council document, which goes on and on and on and on. And at the end of the day, you say, to quote that great old American, where's the meat?
No response to that one then.
Well, I think Stuart was more making a point, and I take his point, to be quite honest. Sorry, Councillor Wheeler.
And that's the question I asked at the start, is how it's done. Okay. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Chair. So, I mean, to start with, I think it's an excellent document and I really like it. I think it's a really good strategy. It has all the things in there that we need for a strategy. But I am going to have to mention the F word, as everyone else has done, and funding. You know, to use Devizes as an example, and Devizes is mentioned in the document of having quite a good cultural strategy already in ourselves and the groups that we have there. This year we've had to cancel the International Street Festival because we lost £100,000 of funding from the Arts Council. And it sort of doesn't matter how good the strategy is that we have for Wiltshire if we don't have that funding there. So I think my question is there sort of an aspiration in the future that we might be able to provide funding and that would tie into a strategy like this? And if we can't have grants and sort of big ticket items, is there a resource that we can provide around back office type support, like bid writing, and you mentioned road closures and all those sort of things that we can coordinate and help people do, because that takes a lot of volunteer time and staff time to deal with.
That second point is a very good one, actually, because I made the point already, and I'll not labour on it, that capacity is little here. But as part of the strategy, you'll see within our actions, we've at least got an action to take on at least one more full-time equivalent in terms of capacity. We have a good idea of how we can drive that forward as well. Tamsin was keen to put 2 in, and I just curbed her enthusiasm, to be quite honest, because I'd rather deliver 2, but just put 1 as an action in the strategy, under promise, over deliver. And I think, yes, that could be a real route, but there are other innovative solutions that we've got up our sleeve as well. I think some of them will be too early to commit to, and I can't, we all know funding's an issue, but we all agree it would be a great enabler, and I'm calling this an enabling document, and it's without that great enabler. But I think there are ways of looking at it and working differently that we might be able to develop a pot. If not, then it would be down the route of capacity to make sure we've got somebody scouring all the opportunities, and we take every opportunity where one arises, really. I mean, already, just as an example, we've had a discussion with the Arts Council about developments, and they say, just like anybody, it's so frustrating, we've got no cash. Like, that kind of comes in at the start of the meeting straight away, and we get that, but almost by a bit of energy and a bit of vision about what we could do if that cash were to materialise, who knows when they're in Whitehall corridors having conversations and there's funds become available that need spending quite rapidly. We all know how these things work. Then I think we're in a good place to capture that because they know we're ready because we've developed things like this.
Councillor Murray. Oh, Paul, sorry.
Sorry, just an additional point. I think it's a really good point about the bid writing. Tamsin's job title is Funding and Arts Officer. She comes from a background of supporting community organisations to apply for national lottery funding. So absolutely, we've got that capacity. I think the other important thing when you're writing a funding bid is being able to demonstrate how that bid contributes to a broader strategy, which we now have in place. So for those organisations to be able to hang their hat on something that we're trying to achieve in Wiltshire, that's part of a shared vision, that we as an organisation haven't created in a dark room. We've actually gone out and consulted all of those key organisations and more broadly as well. I think that will really add value to those applications. Can't comment now whether they'll be successful or not, but that's in part one of the reasons why we've created this document.
Okay, back to you, Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Chair. So, yeah, well done on the strategy, and I think it's great that we have it. The culture's got a really important role to play, despite all the challenges. Personally, I would like to see climate change and environment as a core theme. I don't think it's just a principle. I mean, it is a cross-cutting thread, but you won't drive it forward just as a principle. It really needs to be a theme. And I think it's not just about reinforcing existing culture, but being really positive in influencing culture to support the new and urgent challenges faced around rapidly changing climate and environment. If we don't shift the culture to be able to cope with that, we're not going to do well. I think there are real cultural issues at the moment around climate change. We're seeing them in national politics. Culture wars are developing, and a lot of it's based on misinformation and lack of engagement, where people are not feeling part of that solution. So I think we could have a real role to play in that. And there's a lot of vested interests out there as well. So if we can empower people to understand and take positive action in their own and their children's interests, and make positive carbon reduction, environmental protection as part of a culture, future culture, like a bit like the Future Generations Bill view in Wales, get it embedded as this is where we're trying to get to, and it's all positive. I just say it does say in the document, looking at how arts and cultural activity can be delivered in a sustainable and environmentally responsible way, but yet you do that anyway. I think it's much more about how arts and cultural activities can enable climate change, our climate change ambitions as a council, and our commitment in helping Wiltshire's residents and businesses cut carbon and prepare for the impacts of climate change is what I'd like to see in there. And I think others are doing it. So you've got Creative Carbon Scotland, will give you some ideas of how they've incorporated it. I think libraries have a really important role to play. I think it's not always about our funding. Obviously, we need to look at where funding can support some of the things we're suggesting. There is national funding, but it's tough, I know, around the arts. There is climate change funding can come in sideways, actually, to this. But there's also town councils supporting these activities. So we've supported our folk festival as a town council in Chippenham in the past, and if Wiltshire's kind of influencing that support in the way that aligns with our strategy, we can leverage others' funding into it as well. That's my main theme. I'd just like to really see that as a key theme. Thank you.
Yeah, again, we couldn't agree with you more. Myself and Tamsin, a few months ago, we attended a workshop one Saturday up at Pound Arts in Corsham, and it was all around the arts and the ability of the arts to raise the profile of the climate challenge that we've got in front of us. It really did stimulate some things in my mind about the power of this particular subject matter and how it can play that huge part. So I totally concur. Yeah.
Okay, we'll move to Councillor Jackie Lay. I have got your hand, Derek. You're next up in. Okay, so Jackie next.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Murray has put it probably much better than I would with regard to environment, but that was something that I picked up as well about the environment. But I think it's great to have a strategy, and I don't think it's just about funding. It's about having these are our aspirations as a council. This is what our policies are. These support policies so that other decision makers in the council can use the strategy, which I think is really key. I know that in my community we had development where we had contribution from developers for an art piece, which was then worked with the local people of that estate. So this is what the strategy could be doing, should be doing. I noticed you talked about there were 4 strategic arts partners, but I couldn't find out who they all were. And I wondered why Wiltshire Wildlife might not have been included. The other thing about community, I know you talk a lot about culture and community, but communities, they don't need culture as in art. Part of the community culture is the way they help and support each other through volunteering. And again, this strategy can help with that side of things, because again, through the area boards, with a strategy in place, we're able to then use the funding to say, well, the strategy's there to help the volunteers support their communities. And the other thing is that I don't know if you know, but in Children Select, we have the voice and participation service for young people who we do a lot of work with, or Joe Sutton does, he probably would be a good person for you to be contacting to get the children feeding back as to how they feel they're part of this strategy. I think that was all of, I mean, the bit that I had with environment, a bit more basic than what Councillor Murray was saying, was that the environment shouldn't be so much about encouraging people to go out there and travel around Wiltshire to see the different things. We should be trying to stay at home a bit more and appreciate what we have at home, because we have some fantastic things going on in each of our communities. I don't know if that's any questions. I don't do questions.
I am going to come back if that's all right. And there's none of what you said, Councillor Lay, that I disagree with at all. But I am going to hone in on a particular point that I've been passionate about throughout this whole process. And I've talked about it being an enabling document, and we've mentioned it a couple of times. We did use Wiltshire Wildlife Foundation were involved in developing it. But the big thing that I've been passionate about, this is about culture for all. And again, I give you one little anecdote. I was on the Heath, fortunate enough to be on the Heath at the start of community conversations, which the leader kicked off, when one of the residents was talking about one of our partners who we work with, who I have to say it's developing quite nicely, the conversations that we're having with them. But somebody from the Heath had said, we're sick of these organisations in the city pushing middle-class culture onto us, and we are very keen to make sure that we are delivering art and culture for whatever anybody perceives art and culture to be. We want to enable that, really. So I think that's a really strong point that you made there.
Thank you, Jackie. Tamsin, do you want to say on?
Just to let you know, our 4 arts partners are Wiltshire Creative in Salisbury, Trowbridge Town Hall Arts, the Pound in Corsham, and Wiltshire Music Centre.
There you go. Well done. So I'm going to go to Derek Waters, who's remote. Derek, you're in.
Thanks. I'm currently speaking from a car park in the Tesco at Porth Maddock. So hopefully the reception's okay. David, you've given us an example, for example, the one about highways, dealing with highways to enable cultural activities and so on. What I'm interested in is that element in which you can unblock and enable local activities and provisions through bringing together some of the council officers. I've got 2 specific examples. I don't wish to be parochial, but one is where an art centre was attempting to get an asset transfer, and they ended up finding it so difficult that they pulled out. And another is where we have basically a Wiltshire Council asset, but at the moment it's problematic being able to, if you like, unblock it so it can be used for precisely what you're talking about, cultural activities to the benefit of the community. So I'm just wondering if you could come up with, not for necessarily this particular meeting, but some samples, if you like, of how you think you might be able to help to unblock areas within the council that could potentially be obstructing the assets being used appropriately.
Yes, absolutely. We can take the conversation offline so I can understand the 2 specific examples that you mention. But it might not necessarily be people blocking, and I'm sure you recognise this, out of a will to want to stop it moving forwards. They just maybe need to look at it from a slightly different lens, and that's what we're going to attempt to do as part of the work that we're pulling together.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, David.
Okay, moving back to the room, Tony Jackson, Councillor Jackson, and then Ian.
Thanks, Chair. Is that working? Yeah, thanks. It's a really interesting report, and thank you very much indeed. It's clearly taken a lot of work. I'm looking at paragraph 5.3, where you're exposing the benefits which will arise. And I'm just wondering about the actual consultation process, because I don't recall that the Warminster Athenaeum was included in the consultation. And the Warminster Athenaeum puts on 100 performances annually, shows over 20 films, run by over 70 volunteers. So in terms of attracting footfall and volunteer effort, it might be a good example that other organisations within the county could look to as a model, rather than going out with a begging bowl looking for taxpayers' money. Whilst on the subject of Warminster, I would like to mention two things. The Imber Bus Day, it's an annual event. I don't see why that can't be included in your annexes. And the Wiley Valley Arts Trail, which is a biennial event. And again, I see no mention of those in your annexes. So I leave those thoughts with you, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the Athenaeum is an example. That's exactly, Councillor Jackson, the type of that good practice, understanding how that works and sharing it across the county is definitely part of what we aim to do here. So, yeah, we'll pick that up with you outside of here, definitely.
Councillor McLennan?
Yes, thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, uncoordinated ramblings, which ought to be in the culture bit, really. First of all, I'm also a cynic. I'm a cynic not about the document as such, although I hate reading documents, and I have read it. Nothing to do with your document. The surveys that are done by the council from time to time to see what people's priorities are always put heritage and culture at the bottom. The council, and we are councillors, then uses that to justify lots of other things of why they're spending another £10 on potholes or another £2 on street lighting or whatever it is, and why you have to close the city hall in Salisbury and stuff like that. So that's okay. You know, you've got an uphill battle to overcome that sort of mentality, because the public don't realise. And when you're given, you want some food in your mouth, or do you want to go and see a show, you know, and you haven't got anything, you know, they're easy ticks. Yeah, that one's first and this one's last. So on the face of it, in a way, the public are not the ones to ask, because what the public don't realise is a bit like Jackie said. You know, you're sat at home and your culture's all around you. But equally, culture's a bit further afield as well, and a bit further afield than that, and all over Wiltshire in different guises. Now, that's the first part of the rambling. I hope you don't mind, Chairman.
You got a minute, Ian.
Oh, blimey. Right. So I've also seen documents where the council's put out that when somebody visits us as Wiltshire and stays and spends some time, whatever cultural event they've come to see or whatever activity they've come to do, they end up spending, in the last document I saw, it was about 25 quid, and that was a long time ago. So it's probably double that, or at least 40 odd quid by now, just by appearing in your place. So they expect when they get there, and we as people expect when we get somewhere, to be able to do all the things we wanted to do in the first place, which was come and see something or do something, but then spend some time in the place to see what else is there, and to spend some money on food and drink and whatever activity, and buy a souvenir of your trip, etc. All of that creates economic gain and leads to this, whatever the amount is now per person per visit, for one purpose, doing all the other stuff. And perhaps that's the angle from your perspective that we need to be convinced of, that in effect we are drawing, you know, by changing, turning upside down in a way the thought process, and putting culture not necessarily at the top but high up on the agenda that this is what will happen as a consequence. So that would be my thought there. And in terms of a strategy, there are all sorts of things that you've got in the document, all different types of activities, some greens, some just people meeting, some volunteering, some more things that people would react as cultural, like going to venues and doing stuff. But wouldn't it be good if there was some sort of online map that had all of the things, all the events that you mentioned popping in and out at different times, and a strategy that automatically put it in and took it out again? I don't know whether that's even technically possible, but it sounds a good one. So that's one thing. And I'll give you an example of something that could go wrong. And that is in Scotland. I'm spending more time in Scotland than England at the moment. And every day, almost in the summer, you hear stories about the NC 500, which is the North Coast 500 miles around the top. Now, that was introduced and promoted by the government of Scotland for the purpose of trying to bring economic gain to very remotely, minimally populated areas because they wanted it, they needed it to sustain themselves, and to bring infrastructure that would be generated by all these visitors. And what they found is they've got all the visitors, the promotion of the NC 500 and the linking all the places has been brilliant by the government, but the on-the-ground infrastructure has not come. And perhaps your document is, and working with these other partners, is perhaps the better way to promote that. And my last thought is, we've got all these horses that you mentioned in the report. Couldn't we have a horse trail that's going around, like the NC 500, the Wiltshire Ryder Cock horse or whatever? And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I'll let you off on that. My second hand the second hand fell off on my watch, I think, for some reason there. But anyway, Dave, I'll let you respond to that.
Yeah, good ideas from Councillor McClellan. Are you familiar with the heritage trail apps that we've developed across the county? Yeah, there's another functionality that's coming in as part of that I believe has started to kind of filter out, which is the what's on stuff that lets people know. People can edit it and use it to promote their individual events. So watch this space on that one. But I think that's one of the things that exactly what you're talking about, that this when we worked with FEI and went on that journey with them, they were very much saying what you're saying there, Ian, that we've got to make use of the heritage and the richness of that we have in the county. I mean, we all know, you said the white horses, but we have probably a worldwide, Stonehenge is just, we got some huge, so we need to make better use of that, definitely. And just lastly as well, we didn't, because we literally have no money, fund this piece of work with the consultants. We managed to convince the Arts Council to tip up half of the funding, and our economic regen department funded the other half. So it's very much, we make no bones about, this is about economic regeneration as well as arts and culture. Yeah. Health and well-being is huge. Yeah.
Well, I've listened to everybody on the debate. Very good. Very quickly summing up, someone mentioned about area board funding. A classic example of that one, I was standing in for a councillor at Marlborough. They used to have Marlborough Jazz Festival many years ago. For 30 years it was running, Councillor Fogg in the past. It's obviously fallen by this time, but they started up a new thing called Manton Fest. It's been going for about 4 years, going very well. Marlborough Area Board funded them for £3,000 or £4,000, I think it might have been £5,000 this year. So there is places that you can fund events, local events, beneficiary. Tony Jackson mentioned a couple of places at Warmers that have been mentioned. The Wharf Theatre comes to mind in Devizes. Marlborough Cinema that is now open and doing other events as well. So there are little places around all the areas of the county that would need little bits of help in that. And it's all about community working in that. So anyway, Jackie, you can come back in just for a second, and then I'm going to make a proposal.
An advert. I've sent it through to David, but we have Festival on the Farm in Purton. It's been going since 2009. There's music and all sorts of things go on. It's not my scene, but lots of people turn up. They never apply for funding because they fund themselves, as does a lot of things that are happening in our communities. And they're great examples to show the others it can be done.
Okay, well, in my younger days, I used to attend illegal raves when I was a puppy, so they didn't cost anything to put on. people just showed up. Right, yeah, didn't say that, did I? Right, Wiltshire Cultural Society, I'm going to take you through some resolutions here. A, to endorse the Wiltshire Cultural Strategy 2024 to 2030. B, to acknowledge the action plan that is being proposed. C, to request a report on the delivery of the strategy in 18 months' time. Are we, any amendments? Are we all happy with that? Yeah. So I propose that. Have I a seconder? Okay. Okay. Just a question.
Sorry, mic's on. Can we incorporate that we'd like to see the environment and climate as a theme? Can I take a vote on that?
Hands up. Are you happy with that, or?
I think we need to add something about requests for funding.
Yeah.
You know, the most of us have said that that's the issue.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Can we put that we ask for the budget that's going to come up next April to include something and to be considered? If we're really prioritising the strategy, we need to have a budget that reflects that for next year.
Just getting that written in a second, and I'll read it back to you again, okay? And yours was the environment. And I'll just read that back to you, see if you're all happy with it. If you're not, just let me know. Don't ask, you don't get. Okay, right, so just to add into that then is that the request that there is a budget attached to the strategy, and the other one is the environment is added as a key theme. Climate alliance. Yeah. Is everybody happy with that? No. So, right, you're well, Stuart.
I'm happy to support the addition of a budget. I entirely agree. We encourage council to ensure that the necessary budget is made available. I fail to see what adding the environment does to the paper at all.
Well, I'm going to put it to a vote anyway. So I've got a proposal and I've got a seconder for it. Have I got a seconder? Is that right? Okay, that one right. So all those in favour of the amendment that as it is, as it's written with the two new ones in. Right, well, and those against? 2. So it has been carried. That's the first time we've had a vote where we've had some people vote against. Blimey. Taken a while, 3 years, but never mind. So anyway, those amendments have been carried. And do you want your 2 votes recorded against, gentlemen, or Tony? Okay, right. Officers, thank you very much for a very detailed report. It's been a lot of work and a lot of effort put in, and good luck with it. And let's see where we go from there. Mr. Redfern, you can't go anywhere because you're on the next agenda item as well. So, item 7, the leisure strategy and Warminster project. Now, I did say at the start of the meeting that there was no members of the public present, but I think due to a slight oversight, someone didn't notice he was waiting patiently downstairs. We have one member of the public, Tony Bly, who attended last time. You're here, Tony. So normally let the members of the public speak ahead of the debate. So if you would like to come forward and do what you did before. So welcome. And I said apologies for not recognising you were here, but I got the message just in time. So if you'd like to sit along in between there and use the microphone, press the right hand side.
Okay, good.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay, I won't use all 3 minutes. Thanks for letting me speak again. The latent demand figure on which the £1.5 million is based, latent demand for the gym. The figure in 2015 was 1,013, it's now 1,020. And to me, it doesn't seem likely that latent demand has increased since the huge Snap Fitness gym has opened 24/7 in the middle of town. That causes me to doubt those figures. The latest latent demand figure, which was produced in June, I don't know where it came from, but it didn't come from the Leisure Database Company, because that company was wound up on the 23rd of May in 2022. So whoever produced it, it's just a demographic model with no consideration of local circumstances. And we all know that, yeah, models are great, but you do need boots on the ground to find out what the local situation is. Item 43, once again, the council have said that there is a publicly available squash court in Warminster at the Warminster School. But we have said many times that this is incorrect. On the 24th of April this year, I called Warminster School and spoke to Anthony Stacey, who said that they do have a squash court, but they don't make it available to the public because the court is so very well used. And that caused me to go off on a little bit of a rabbit hole. And I wondered how private schools treat squash. So I got a list of private schools around Bath, and I looked at the first half dozen, and they all promote squash. And all but one of that half dozen have their own courts. And I did wonder whether squash is destined to become an elite pastime, only accessible to the wealthy, much like polo or whiff-waff. Looking at item 50, the response to my statement confirms that extending the existing gym and installing a lift has been dismissed out of hand because no estimate of costings have been undertaken. We've spoken to gym users, and when they found out about the plans to move the gym downstairs, they were horrified. They said, it's got no windows, we don't want to go downstairs. They enjoy the view of the pool and they enjoy the view of the outside world while they're exercising in the gym. And again, demographics aren't going to tell you that. A consultation would have uncovered that kind of problem. Item 54, the Leisure Service focuses on those areas that they know have the best chance of return. Well, as no marketing of squash or engagement of squash players has ever been undertaken, this is clearly a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't know what promotion of squash would actually result in.
You've had 3.5 minutes, so can you wrap up?
Oh, okay.
Can you wrap
30
up,
seconds. Lockdowns decimated many activities, and it takes time for them to recover, and we need to do everything we can to make those things recover. This is especially true of activities that require a partner. If people don't know about it, they're not going to try it. And what I suggest is a moratorium on the gym expansion. Meanwhile, open the second court, promote squash and racquetball, including offering squash to the pupils at the state school next door, and England Squash and existing players will be very happy to help.
Oh, thanks. I'm going to have to stop you there because you had your...
Thank you very much.
Right, okay. So now we'll turn to, I think, Councillor Pillin, this is your team. If you'd like to open it, then we'll turn to David Redfern.
Thank you, Chairman. Rather than go through those items, I'd rather we gave our presentation first and then see where we go from there. David Redfern and I, along with our legal director, I think is here, officers from Public Health, Capital Projects and Leisure are here today because at your last meeting, a member of the public, same member of the public, challenged David's decision as Director of Communities, Culture and Leisure to invest in Warminster Sports Centre. More particularly, he challenged the evidence supporting that decision, and I think that's to a large degree what we've just heard again. Understandably, you asked for a report on this. So I'm going to speak about the wider context, and David will cover the specifics of his decision. We all know that many local authorities are in financial difficulties, which have been building for several years. In such circumstances, as a non-statutory service, leisure is an obvious target. 4 years ago, in spite of previous investments in several community campuses, it was looking as if we may have to make some potentially very unpopular decisions within our leisure portfolio. However, rather than closing sites, in the February 22 budget, the council took a bold decision to allocate £25 million for the new Trowbridge Leisure Centre that we should be building next year, and £10.6 million for leisure improvements. These funds were provided as the means to modernise centres, to maximise income and support public health objectives, and not simply to maintain all existing facilities as they currently may exist. Linked in with this, over the last 3 years, we've taken a good hard look and developed and pursued what we consider to be our reason for being and the direction in which we must go. Key to this is a parallel focus on both commercial success and the service's ability to improve population health and wider social outcomes. With that established, we've also, over the last 3 years, done a number of things, and I'm going to list them. Firstly, we've embedded those principles I've just given from top to bottom within the leisure service. We've also taken them across to all the other services that we work with so that they can understand and work with the leisure service to the betterment of the council's business plan. We've got past the COVID difficulties and its after effects. We brought in-house the 10 centres that were being managed under contract. We've delivered the new Melksham campus. We've continued to invest in new equipment. We've improved the maintenance of our centres. We've restructured our management teams, which now include considerable commercial experience. And finally, we've got the funded investment programme that I talked about the funding a minute ago underway. And an important part of that is what we're talking about today. We're already actually seeing the fruits of all these efforts. At your February meeting, you may recall, you applauded the reported improvements to the sustainability of the service, mainly through increased fitness memberships. And on Monday this week, Cabinet considered the budget outturn for the last financial year. We'd been set a net budget outturn target for our leisure centres, and that, when I say that, I mean covering both our operational budget and our element of FM in this, a net cost of 8.7 million, around that. And that was based on an overall spend of around 22.6 million. We actually, in the end, only cost the council just over 6 million. What this means is that nearly 2.7 million is effectively back into the council's revenue budget. Some of this was due to earlier than expected removal of VAT charges, but the greater part was down to driving memberships and income and making efficiencies. It's also worth noting that these figures do not capture the significant social value generated by our leisure facilities. All 20 are used to deliver the Active Health GP referral programme. Individuals who've experienced a significant health event, it could be a heart attack, stroke, and to recover and improve their health. We offer concessionary rates for those who might not otherwise be able to access physical activity. Host physical activity sessions designed to specifically engage individuals with a disability or SEND through our Ability Sports offer, and enable a broad variety of community organisations, including community sports hubs, to meet and deliver an array of activity that otherwise would not be available to our communities. The point I'm making here is that David's directorate is playing its full part within the wider council's ability to buck the national trend with both its financial position and the maintenance of service delivery. Furthermore, it will continue to do so just as long as we continue to make well-informed decisions based on our business plan and sound evidence. Conversely, were we not to continue to expand and update our fitness offerings, our memberships would move in a negative direction. Our centres would become less sustainable, and we would be right back to facing very unpalatable closure decisions affecting whole communities. Remember that in spite of our improvements, we're still a net cost, which must be justified by our contribution to the wider council wellbeing objectives. So while the commercial sector is more, if not entirely, focused on their financial outturn, we seek the right balance between sustainability gains and benefits to public health, in which we intentionally target specific groups that the private sector may not share as a priority. It's a key element of our prevention agenda. So, David and his team are tasked to utilise our leisure facility stock to achieve greatest public health and financial return. I'm going to leave him to put the detail on the decision making. This bit's just for Jackie. Don't panic. This decision has no effect on badminton players. Right? Last time you seemed concerned about the badminton players. They're not involved. And now I'd like to put some perspective on this. David's going to cover the detail, but I want to cut to the chase regarding why we're actually here today. At the root of all the apparent concerns about our decision-making, consultation, evidence, and the use of taxpayers' money, which have involved a lot of public media coverage, the intervention of a local MP, a code of conduct complaint against me, a public question at Warminster Hustings, multiple freedom of information questions, a referral suggesting a breach of GDPR, a meeting with said MP, 2 meetings with Squash representatives, and, amidst that, suggestions of corruption and fraud, both in public media and in written communications. And in the last week, we've had a petition delivered to us, signed by over 500 people. It is of interest. I won't dwell on what the petition was for, but it's of interest that of those 505, 128 were from within Wiltshire, and I believe 60 plus from around the Warminster area. But what is clear from that petition to me is this has stirred interest beyond Wiltshire because it stirred interest nationwide, Europe, and even as far as Canada, the US of A, Australia, and Argentina. So the other 377 part of that 505 are from somewhere other than Wiltshire. And now, finally, this report to you. What this is all about, really, is the local squash communities wish to stop or delay or change this project in order to retain 2 side-by-side squash courts in Warminster Sports Centre. To give you a little idea of the sports centre, it consists at the moment of 2 side-by-side glass-back squash courts, one of which hasn't been serviceable for some time. I'll come to that. A swimming pool, a sports hall, a studio area, and that's all on the ground floor, and on the first floor, a gym, which we would describe as relatively small, has been mentioned, overlooking the pool. For the past 3 years, only one of these courts has been functioning, as the low usage of the remaining court has not justified the cost of its reinstatement. Similarly, at Leighton Leisure Centre, 4.5 miles away in Westbury, one of the 2 hardback courts there, side by side, has not been used for squash since March of last year. The centre manager considered the low court usage made it uneconomic and has been using it for group exercise classes. So, for the past nearly 18 months, squash has generated barely enough use to justify keeping these 2 remaining separate courts available. On removal of the Warminster courts, and this is on the assumption that there is the demand that would transfer from Warminster to Westbury, we would be intending to return the second court back into service, so there would be 2 hardback courts, hardback, not glass, alongside each other available in Westbury. I'm advised that those 2 courts in Westbury are perfectly up to standard for training and competition standard, and if anybody wants to question that, I have the expert in the room. Thus, the net loss of courts in all of this between Warminster and Westbury, 4.5 miles apart, is nil. The only loss is the glassback feature and some extra local travel. The gain is that now we have 2 will have 2 side-by-side courts, which is what our squash players repeatedly tell us they need for competitive squash. I'm going to end on that and ask David to talk about his decision in this.
Over to you, David.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian. And as Ian rightly points out, what I'm not going to do is get into the details of the report that was produced, as I believe that is not the intentions of this committee. I want to keep the, wherever I can, and I will refer to in detail Warminster at moments, but just give the committee an insight as to this decision-making process that goes ahead for such projects. So, ultimately, the authority to spend leisure capital sits with me as the Director of Leisure, Culture and Communities. But, as I'm sure you agree with me, that sum of money should not be for the decision-making of just one person. And so what you see on the slide in front of you is the layers that we have put in place of consultation and support for myself to be able to make informed decisions. I'll just chat you through these. For me, the projects board, the project initiation group, if you like, is probably the most important. And to give you an idea of the makeup of that, as you can see there, we've got operations staff. But I think it's important to qualify these are operations staff who've been in the sector for a number of years, and they draw on the experience of our wider team who've been working on such projects for a number of years. We do have a dearth of experience in the leisure team now. That has changed over the last decade. And they work with our capital build team. Now, just to give you an insight on the capital build team, the first campus project we delivered was back in 2015 at Corsham. So we've got nearly a decade of capital build experience in that team too, who have no doubt learnt a lot along the way and have a lot of experience of delivering such projects. Once there's been the inception of a project, that will then move up to the project delivery group, which is where I get involved and I chair that group. We have the head of service of capital build in there. We have the head of service for leisure operations, and we have the head of service for development who gets involved in these projects too. Once the project has been deemed a suitable project to take forward, it will move forward to the board. Members of that board being people like the Deputy Chief Exec, the Corporate Director of Place, the Director of Public Health, and other members such as the Cabinet member sat by my right-hand side and other heads of service. So you can see there's been a multi-layered and very experienced approach at looking at these projects. With regard to, we've put some criteria in place that we assess, make our decisions on any investment. As you can see, I will just read out what those, that kind of framework that we use are. We know we have to improve financial sustainability. Ian's already honed in on that. And with that, maximise income as best we can. We're different from the private sector. We want to support public health objectives. And again, this is why we have the head of service for development in there, because things like this, gyms do support our active health programme where GPs refer into it, and the best form of the best form of activity that we can offer for those clients is things like the gyms. So we want to support public health objectives. We want to, and for a very similar reason, want to grow physical activity participation. So when we make these decisions, it's about where can we grow the most physical activity participation. And then, and some of this will answer some of the questions that were posed to us by the member of public who came in here today, which I just wanted to check with the committee as well. If there's anything we can't answer that has been asked today, it was pointed out last time that it would be helpful if we had prior notice of some of that so that we can make good informed responses and the committee can see those responses. But we want to ensure cost effectiveness. So it's not simply about, oh, we can stick it anywhere to protect what we currently have. We have to look at what's the most cost effective way of producing such projects. Spending multiple millions of pounds just to save minority sport infrastructure would be something that would be carefully considered as part of this process. Next slide, please, Paul. Okay, the importance. Why fitness then? Well, again, you can see the importance. We generated 15.5 million last year as part of the leisure outturn, and a third of that was through fitness. As you can see, a small proportion of that was through squash across the piece. And at Warminster, it's a similar picture, but as you can see, Warminster's slightly lagging behind the average percentage of fitness that we have across the county, which that suggests to us, as I'll come on to, that it's not quite performing where it should be from a fitness suite perspective. Next slide, please, Paul. So, quite right, the member of the public has talked about latent demand. This is something that in the sector is quite well known as a measure of how well a facility can perform in terms of, if the fitness offer is the right offer. What I'm presenting there on that slide is the project since 2015, since we started our first project. I just arrived at the council actually as Springfield campus was being launched. That was the very first one, and down the left there, that's the list of projects that have developed fitness suites. They've developed other things as well, but if you work in the industry and have worked in this sector for a number of years, it's the fitness suite that generates the income here. Once the development's been done, we've got there the members that were in that facility prior to the launch of the fitness development within that facility. And then we have this notion of latent demand. And that is that is produced by the Leisure Database Company. I don't know how on earth or where the information has come from that it folded in 2023, because it's just produced last month the State of the Industry report for the entire national picture. So maybe people have got that confused with some other company. But they in turn use Experian. I think we all know the analytics that Experian produce. And closely look at various factors that come up with a potential for that community if the fitness offer is right. The right-hand column is quite interesting because in all but one of our projects thus far, we've managed to exceed the latent demand target. That's really important. There's only Calne that hasn't, and as you can see, that has almost doubled the amount of members. So we get a fairly good picture from what we know already in county that this works. What I can tell you is when I came to Wiltshire in 2015, I'd spent nigh on 20 years prior to that doing such projects and realising that this was the way forward for sustainability and public health gains. Next slide, please, Paul. Now, the next one is an interesting slide that we use to look at investment opportunities. So what we do is, again, we look at the current membership base, and this one was taken as a snapshot at the beginning of January this year, and we look at the latent demand figure. Now, quite right, it was pointed out in the last meeting that the last time we did latent demand, or the figures were produced by the Leisure Database Company for Wiltshire. They're not cheap, by the way. This is not a free service. That is the 2015 figure. We did the 2022 one. I've got a bit of a whiz in our team who basically worked on those figures and looked at population growth and applied a percentage to those for an indication. What is interesting is the figure's absolutely right that has been quoted. We went after the last Environment Select, we went back to the Leisure Database Company direct. We didn't ask Pulse. We commissioned a piece of work to check for ourselves that this was right. I think my guy internally was quite relieved that he was about 7 out from his 2022 predictions. This is a very accurate measure of how many members we could have in a fitness suite if it's the right offer. Now, the top two there, we've talked about Trowbridge already, I think, today. We all know about the leisure centre that's been developed there. We've got the biggest potential growth there. That's been dealt with. The Olympiad, as we speak, we are refurbishing the gym at the Olympiad, putting new kit into it, latest state-of-the-art kit, and so we'll begin to eat into that potential of 1,910. The next biggest potential after that, as you can see, is Warminster. Hence why we wanted to focus on this as one of the projects that we are dealing with. The ones in white, if you're wondering why the colour coding, are ones that we've not been able to address yet for various reasons, but they're on our radar. And the one in amber or orange, whichever way you look at it, is Tidworth Centre. It's a peculiar one. I've never come across a centre like that before because it's owned by the MOD. There's nothing that we can do with that. It was built as a PFI. We can't really touch it. We rely on the good relationship with the MOD to do the work that we do down there. Thank you. Now we move to squash and the picture for squash. Now, I too, like the member of the public who's presented earlier, have done a bit of research. We've looked at people who are on our border, so South Gloucestershire, Circadian Trust, for those of you who know it better, it's operated by a trust. We've got Baines and we've got Swindon, all to our northeast borders. We looked at the amount of squash courts they have got and the general public that they are serving. South Gloucestershire's way out there in terms of public courts still there. When I spoke to the chief exec there, he did have 13. He has plans to convert some of the final 8 that he has. You can do the numbers yourself in terms of extrapolating with Wiltshire. I won't do that for you. Baines has 2. Swindon has 2. Barnsley, my own town, I just had to check on that, how many they've got. They've got one public squash court left. Oldham. Well, why did I ring Oldham? Because I know the chief exec there. I also know that he has recently just stood down from his role as chair of Community Leisure UK, or CLUC as it's known in the industry, that basically overarch 25% of the sector. He not only said to me, Dave, I don't run squash courts anymore. My job is to improve participation. It's not to support what are minority sports. It's a minority sport that I've played most of my life, by the way. It really does grieve me that we have to make these decisions, but make these difficult decisions we must. And Wakefield, why do I mention that one? Well, another 25% of the sector is like ours. It's local authorities who run their own leisure facilities. And a lady I spoke to recently, it was a meeting I'd set up anyway to talk about other things that we were going to talk about, because they want Wiltshire. They believe Wiltshire to be a forerunner in what we're doing here in local authority leisure. And we've been invited up to London to advise a panel up there on this type of stuff, actually. But Wakefield has none, yet again. And again, she was surprised at the amount of squash courts, as you can see, public squash courts that Wiltshire has. Yes, we've got more population, but I'll let you do the numbers. Paul, next one, please. This is the occupancy. We may be a few percent out. You know, it's difficult to get these things massively accurate, but we've tried to look at the bookings that we've had, and we've tried to have a look at the availability of court space. As Ian's already alluded to, the smarter managers out there are using their courts to do multiple activities. You can see that Warminster, on the one court that we're operating there, has 7% occupancy, just below mid-table, but quite low. Some great performers up there. Devizer's doing well, Salisbury doing well. We met a chap from Salisbury last week, and they are doing a great job with the courts that they've got down there. But they're how the 24 available courts are performing, which would suggest we could do something more efficient with the ones that we currently operate. Next slide, please, Paul. We've been to squashing. We've looked at the surveys as well, the Sport England surveys, the active live surveys. These are our Bible in the industry. Sport England do their research well. Again, I don't really have to point it out, is it? That it really guts me that squash, for a number of years now, has been in decline, and the reports over the last 2 years from from Sport England absolutely corroborate that. Thanks, Paul. So lastly then, in terms of the Warminster Sports Centre findings and our detailed assessment of investment options to improve sustainability and increase participation and the usage of Warminster Sports Centre, we found the following. Investing in the fitness suite offer provides the best means of delivering financial and public health gains. If we achieve our latent demand, then it would suggest there's a 5 to 7 year payback. As you can see on the chart that I put up there, if we go beyond, like most of our other projects, that could be much sooner. It would make a significant contribution to the health and well-being of local residents, but refurbing the squash courts would not recoup our costs whatsoever. There are 2 serviceable squash courts side by side, 4 miles away. It seems a no-brainer to me, but I'll let the committee ask questions.
Did you want to come back on it, Ian, and then I'm going to go to questions?
Ever so quickly, if I may, I think David has answered most of the points that were mentioned, except for specifically the Warminster School Court. Our consideration was not based at all on the availability of Warminster School Court.
Okay, right. Just to let you know, before I open this to questions, and I know that Councillor Jackson, so we would not normally look at a specific issue, but the Select Committee agreed to take this report at the last meeting. So I remind members it is our role to investigate county-wide and strategic issues, which allows scrutiny to devote its resources to the county's big corporate priorities. This report is therefore an exception. So I also have currently two members from the Warners area, Councillor Ridout and Councillor Davis. I'll let you speak when I've gone through the members here. And I've got you down, Mel, to speak, but I'm going to go to Councillor Tony Jackson first because this is yours. If you have any questions to ask.
Thanks, Chair. I have no questions, thanks.
Councillor Jacob.
Thank you. It seems like you've been a bit through the mill on this project, and my question or comments aren't really around the decision making. I think you've demonstrated that you've gone through a really thorough process and you've done a lot of work to reach that decision. And I don't know Warminster well enough to make any comments about challenging, and I'm not about challenging that. The only comment I wanted to make was linked to both the cultural strategy that we've been talking about and in paragraph 6, where we're increasing sports and physical activity participation amongst all Wiltshire residents, specifically those that face the greatest barriers to participation, ensuring everyone has the opportunity to stay active. And I suppose my questions around us thinking about what we do in the future is 4 miles is a long way if you haven't got a car, and is our transport good enough to make sure that everyone can participate? And just having that thought in our mind. And a week today, I think it's the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games. And we all support Britain, England, UK, whatever we decide we're supporting. But often we lament the lack of sporting success. Nobody is going to the Olympics because they can go to the gym. They might go to the Olympics because they can play squash or many other sports also available. And I suppose what I would like to see is us making sure that residents of Wiltshire have the opportunity to excel at all of the sports, and that there are, and I know we've got 24 courts in Wiltshire, but can we all get there? Can we give everybody the opportunity to participate in all sports? The gym is a particular kind of exercise, and I understand how it supports health and well-being, and you can prescribe and get people off to the gym, and I can understand the financial viability around that. But I just want to make sure, thinking about what we said about cultural strategy and our leisure services strategy, that people have the opportunity to participate in all sport easily. And if the only thing in your town is a gym, then you're not ever, well, I'm never going to the Olympics, but those young people with aspirations are never going to get to the gym. And just my last point, I'm conscious with the development of the leisure centre in Trowbridge, we'll no longer have a leisure pool. And I believe, and I might be wrong, that the closest diving pool now will be Southampton. And again, are we making sure young people in Wiltshire have the opportunity to participate in all sports?
Okay. Let me answer, if I may. 4 miles. But here's the problem. We're expecting to get an extra 500 plus people using Warminster. So it's potential. Let's say, for example, we spent that money in Westbury. So are we expecting 500 people to go 4 miles in that direction, or are we expecting 20, 10, 30 to go 4 miles in the other direction? I would say also, I have to go more than 4 miles to get to a squash court. A very large number of people in Wiltshire have to go more than 4 miles to get to a squash court. And to address your point about sports, well, wouldn't it be nice? We don't have a ski slope. We don't have, and we won't have a diving facility. No, we won't. It would have cost an extra £4 million. For how many people? So the notion that we can go, wouldn't it be nice to keep 24 courts so that people can potentially be Olympians at squash? At what cost in all of this? And I could sit here and come up with an enormous list of sports that we don't necessarily have facilities for in this. So I explained right at the beginning, we have to be viable in this, otherwise we won't exist at all. The other point you make about is the attraction of gym. Actually, gym is not just for the gym bunnies who want to develop their muscles. It's actually a facility that lots of people in lots of sports, be it football, rugby, all sorts of other sports, now want access to a gym in order to prepare themselves for that sport. So it's actually a kind of universal service across many, many sports. So instead of picking, which sports are going to be on the Wiltshire list that we will be supporting in all 20 of our leisure centres, we have to focus on what is financially viable, what is going to have the most effect in this. And the other thing I've got to counter the ambition of the Olympic Games for, I'm afraid Wiltshire budget is not about preparing people for the Olympic Games. We are far, far more interested in providing that kind of prevention and support for those people who need that, be they SEND, be they disabled, be they people recovering, etc., that affect all the rest of what we do in Wiltshire, than I'm afraid for the gladiators. Now, the gladiators, that's fine and good, and we do support. We have a whole scheme supporting Olympians. But we can't turn our sports facilities into the centres of expertise to prepare for the Olympics. That would not justify your and my taxes, I'm afraid.
I totally understand your point and I understand the efficiency, but I'm just, in terms of a strategy, I just feel we need to remember to be ambitious. We've just talked about that within the cultural strategy, and we need to remember that we still want to cater for those residents as well. And if you have an Olympian in your
I'm going to come straight back on you. Still cater. We're coming down here to, I think, 23 courts from 24. By the time we've done all the projects that we've currently scheduled. So we're already several times better provided than other authorities.
I'm not challenging your decision in Warminster. I'm just trying to say, when we go forward, we need to think about all of the people who need to participate in sport, not just the few. And that's your argument here. I understand that's your argument in your decision in Warminster, but I just would like that to be part of what we are thinking about going forward.
Yeah, Councillor Jacobs, in some way, we're under scrutiny here, quite rightly. But I think Ian makes some very good points there. But it's for the Olympic movement and the governing bodies of these minority sports to sort this out. It's not for a local authority to sort this out. We're just trying to keep our facilities open. As Ian has pointed out, facilities that 2 or 3 years ago were very much under scrutiny, and we're doing our best to drive what we think is the sustainable. And there are going to have to be some tough decisions along the way. I get that. But what our team is about, and Ian's pointed it out as well, if we've got underprivileged kids who need to, travel support, I'm not saying we can, but we have got a scheme there where we do the gala dinner and we give grants out to kids to support their sporting work. So if that's there, as a team, I would want to, say to particularly my development team who are represented here, how can we do that? But on this occasion, I don't think it is a tough decision, but only in the sense that, we are losing squash courts. But as I've tried to represent there, we're way behind the curve of what the rest of the country is doing.
Councillor Wheeler, you want to speak?
Yeah, sorry, briefly, I'm afraid we've been listening now for a very long time to a justification for a decision that seems to me properly taken. I would just like to add that, of course, we don't support all Olympic sports. We don't support the equine sports in any way, and we should do, but we don't. You don't support sailing. You don't. So there's a ton of stuff that goes into these. By the way, I will point out squash does not become an Olympic sport until 2028 when it goes to Los Angeles. So we're in the business of providing fitness and facilities to encourage people to keep themselves fit. They may be used in addition by people who want to keep themselves fit for competitive sport, whether it be at the Olympic or whatever level. But I really do think we could, Chairman, with respect, terminate this discussion reasonably briefly.
Before I squash this debate, Councillor Rideau. Councillor Rideau wanted to speak. She's made the effort to come along, so Councillor Rideau.
Thank you, Chair. Very kind of you. For those who don't know me, I'm going to be very parochial because I've now represented Warminster for over 20 years and I've lived there for nearly 60. Now, I've listened to some of the points made and I'm very appreciative of some of those, especially to Councillor McClellan, who said this attracts people. Unfortunately, our sports centre is nowhere near any facilities. It's way to the east of Warminster. There is transport. We have local buses, obviously, that can take people. But in actual fact, it is easier to get to Westbury from the centre of Warminster than it is from to get across Warminster. So we have been struggling since the 60s, 70s to get our sports centre, and Warminster in particular since Unitary, to get investment in what is the most old-fashioned, dilapidated building. And I can only ask you, please, to support this investment. It is a capital investment, Councillor, who asked I've forgotten his name, the question. It is a capital investment. I speak as chair of the Financial Planning Task Group. I have immense experience in my past job of project management and finances. And I do accept that, like all project plans, there will be winners and occasionally some losers. But the overall principle is we want to keep Warminster Sports Centre open. And in that, it needs 1.5 million of investments. Now, as chair of the area board, Councillor Blair Pilling and David both came and did all this presentation. Unfortunately, Councillor Jackson was unable to be present, but there were plenty of people present from the town and villages, and nobody spoke in objection to this. In fact, they thought the presentation on Warminster and its 18 villages was wonderful. And we had no dissent from that. And today I have with me Councillor Davis, who has been on the town council even longer than I have, who is going to tell you about their deliberations and what they said. I would ask that you approve of this money being spent, this capital money being spent for Warminster. And yes, it's sad we will lose a squash court, but there are other squash courts that will fill in for this for the very few who want it. And it compares, Wiltshire compares so favourably with everywhere else, and Warminster's use is just simply not viable. Thank you very much, Chair. I will give way to Councillor Davis now, who will speak on behalf of Warminster.
Is there any date, Andrew, is there anything you want to add to that? I think we've done it. You'll have to come to the microphone because we're live. We need to move on because...
Dual-hatted member, I sit on Warminster Parish Council as well. Warminster Parish Council had an extraordinary meeting of which they had representation from the squash players, spoke at that meeting saying about this, and Warminster Town Council said that they would, although they sympathised with the squash players, they were more than happy to not lose the investment that was being put forward for the project.
Thank you for being brief. Right, that's. I'm not going to take any more. I think, like I said, we're not decision making. This is what I'm going to read out to you now. We're going to note the strategy for leisure alongside the framework for decision making. Then we're going to note the response from the Director of Leisure, Culture and Communities on the public statement made at the 4th of June ESC around the specific project in Warminster. And C, I want to thank the Cabinet member and the officers for their comprehensive response. Do I have a seconder to that?
Yes.
All in favour? Okay, anyone against? Nope. Okay, thank you, David, thank you, Ian, for your, and Paul Pritchard and Pip. No, I did not honestly think that was going to take that long, but anyway, I did not for 1 minute. Right, let's get back into the meat. Speed Limit Assessment Task Group Final Report. I think we have got Councillor Jonathan Seed. I am sorry, Jonathan, we have taken such a long time. I didn't expect that one to take so long. I'm really sorry, members.
Chairman, can I ask at some point, is there any way we could actually limit the length of contributions, if you see what I mean?
I try to keep my members here to 3 minutes, but I was just a bit surprised at that.
Because
report.
even at full council,
The two members,
you're limited to 5 minutes. if I
yeah,
remember
I know,
right.
I didn't know we're a cabinet member. Okay, I'll talk to the cabinet member. Councillor Seed, sorry to keep you waiting. Speed limit assessment report.
Very interesting, hugely interesting, the squash debate. And it's not one that we didn't have when I was a cabinet member years ago. Actually, we did and came to the same conclusion. But there we are. And someone who's been involved in, well, my daughter in international sport, actually what was said was very interesting because we get no support at all publicly, but did get support from a grant from the council, which made a massive difference at the time. So there are ways of those who aren't involved and getting any support, or getting support in another way from this council. Anyway, that's by the by. The Speed Limit Assessment Task Group, it's been a lengthy journey. This report presents the findings and recommendations of the Speed Limit Assessment Task Group for endorsement by the Select Committee and referral to the Cabinet member for a response. However, I would like to start by thanking our task group officer, Simon Bennett, for the enormous amount of work that he put into making this task group itself work. I found his candid help and advice invaluable, and without it, we would not be in a position to bring the report and recommendations that we have today. So, Simon, thank you. This has been a really difficult task group because it's comprised of a very diverse group of members with very different views on the subject. And I think it's fair to say several were clearly driven by a less than happy experience of speed limit assessment issues in their own areas. We found early in our journey that we could not right previous wrongs, but we could recommend a better and more transparent process that would prevent recurrence of previous dissatisfaction, or would certainly help to do so. We're aware that this report and recommendations have not achieved everything that every member wanted, but the recommendations were unanimously supported by all members attending the last two meetings at which they were discussed. The task group was set up with terms of reference in front of you by the Select Committee on the 11th of January of this year to look at the Council's speed limit assessment process, having had this matter referred to it by the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee. Our terms of reference were endorsed by this committee on the 20th of March of this year. The task group met 7 times between March and July, and I'd like to thank the witnesses who gave of their time and expertise, as well as all of the task group members. A speed limit assessment is an evidence-based review of a speed limit on a specific section of road to determine the appropriate maximum limit. It considers collision data, local evidence, the road environment, and an assessment of speed data. Guidance is provided by the Department for Transport, but this is broadly framed and can be read in different ways, and this was an issue that we did encounter in our journey. It is left to local transport authorities to how to apply it, and how it is variously interpreted across the country is testament to that fact, and there is a massive difference in how that DFT evidence is interpreted. The process and its outcomes have in certain instances been contentious, with residents and elected members contesting the findings. And we did look in great detail at where that had happened in one area of our county. A balance needs to be struck between the views of road users and residents, as well as keeping people safe and the traffic flowing, and that is itself an issue. The aim of the task group was therefore to produce a report with recommendations that help support a speed limit assessment system that has public confidence and is operated in a consistent and transparent manner. Based upon the evidence and after our deliberations, we've made 7 recommendations. And those are in front of you, and you've had those in your packs. These are intended to help explain the policy and process, standardise that process, capture and use all the relevant evidence, publish the data with recommendations, and create a challenge process. We would welcome comments from the Select Committee about any part of the report, and we also ask the Select Committee to endorse the report of the task group and refer it to the Cabinet Member for Housing, Strategic Assets, Asset Transfer, the Cabinet Member for Highways for response at the committee's next meeting.
Okay, I think before you come in, Nick, up at this stage, I think we'll take the questions and you can answer the questions. No, Mr. Budden, you've been quiet. You've not spoke today so far, so I'm going to let you go first.
Thank you, Chairman, for the opportunity.
3.5 minutes is your max.
Well,
I'll let you go 4 and that's it.
Thank you for the report. I was looking forward to it as I hoped it would start to address the appalling state of road safety in Wiltshire. It seems to me you've missed an opportunity, and I'd like to put 4 points to it, if I may. Firstly, at paragraph 27, you draw attention to the DFT guidance that appropriate speed limits contribute to reducing the number of road deaths as well as casualties overall, and some other bullet points beyond that. Yet you haven't examined whether local speed limits in Wiltshire have had any of these effects. Indeed, you go so far as to admit that you didn't look at collision data. What we know is that the numbers killed and seriously injured on Wiltshire's roads after declining during the pandemic returned in 2022 to the level of a decade previously. 17 people lost their lives on Wiltshire's roads in 2022, 276 killed or seriously injured. Surely the way to build public confidence in the system of speed assessment is for it to achieve progressive reduction in road injuries over time. In failing to identify that as a necessary goal, you've missed an important opportunity. Secondly, correctly, you summarise the national framework in paragraphs 12 to 16 and draw attention to the DFT assertion that right speeds should be used in the right places. But you don't appear to have challenged the Wiltshire Council presumption that the default speed limit should be the national one of 60 mph. The national speed limit is wholly inappropriate on a large number of our country roads and through rural villages. On these roads, 60 mph is surely not the right speed in the right place. The presumption that 60 mph should be the default limit for safe speed on our roads, that this should be the case unless challenged through an assessment process, is surely false. It seems to me that thinking should be turned on its head so that our starting assumption is that 60 mph should be the limit only where it's clearly demonstrated that it's safe to drive at that speed. My contention would be that the default limit on our rural roads should be reduced to a maximum of 50, similar to the limit on rural roads in France and in Ireland. Wiltshire Council should take on the liability for assessing those few lengths of rural roads where the national maximum speed limit should continue to apply. You refer in your, my third point, you refer in your conclusions at paragraph 59 to the calling into question of the Solomon curve and the 85th centile criteria that are used by Wiltshire in determining an assessment outcome. Yet nowhere in the report do you define these terms, how they are used in speed assessments, or why they've been called into question. Members of the council, let alone parish councillors and members of the public reading your report, will have no idea what you're referring to, as you don't attempt to set out what the issues are. My own view is simply put, the notion that an assessment should be based on whether or not 85% of road users are travelling at or below a certain speed is misguided. It's been widely commented on that speed limits set on the basis of percentile assessments of drivers' current behaviour fail to keep people safe, precisely because they're based on current human behaviour rather than safety. If I, who was not on the task group, can find with a few minutes research online considerable comment around the globe on alternative methodologies, how is it that the task group failed to consider any of these, remark upon them, or set out a rationale either for change or for continuing with the current methodology? In paragraph 16, where you list the, finally, point 4, in paragraph 16, where you list the component elements of speed management, you omit any mention of vehicle engineering and design. One of the most significant changes in vehicle engineering in 60 years since seat belts were first mandated came into effect just over a week ago, with the requirement that all new cars sold right across Europe, including the UK, will be equipped with speed limiters. This technology, interacting automatically with GPS and vehicle management systems to warn drivers when they're exceeding a local speed limit, will complement existing enforcement technologies and techniques and increase its effectiveness. Yet you fail even to mention it or consider its implications for the speed assessment process in Wiltshire. I would also add, although you mention at paragraph 61 changes that have been made, to quote you, which have begun to improve the assessment process, you don't spell out what those changes are or what they mean. The task group was asked to consider how speed limit assessments can help develop public confidence in road safety measures, but I submit you failed to do so. The report is a missed opportunity, altogether disappointing and not worthy of our recommendation.
Before you answer, Councillor C, some of these are government policy, I think, so it'd be difficult for you to actually answer some of those questions. Just to be, if you look into the detail of it, but I'll let you have an attempt to answer. And
I submit their Wiltshire policy, Chair.
well, there's some of that's government policy.
Can you put slide 2 back on, please, the terms of reference? Because our terms of reference did not invite us to go down any of the lines that, well, or the lines that have just been introduced. I'm afraid you might be disappointed, but we had some quite keen members who were, and it was actually on politically, we had 3 Liberal Democrats, 3 Conservatives, some of whom were very, very keen on the issues of speed limit, and we were asked to assess the speed limit assessment process. We were not asked or tasked with going in to reviewing speed limits in Wiltshire. That is what we were asked to do, and that is what we have done. We were not asked to examine, have a wider examination of road safety or national speed limits. That was not our remit. The concerns that led to this process were quite simply a dissatisfaction with that speed limit assessment process that was in place. And we have sought a way of, we have distilled our way into trying to make recommendations for something which will change that process. Not national speed limits, not national road safety. We were not a body that could address that. Were we to want to change the national speed limit across Wiltshire from 60 miles an hour to 50 miles an hour, I don't really believe that that was anything that our task group could, would, or should have done. So I rebuff your dissatisfaction. Clearly, if you had such an interest, you could have volunteered to come on the committee. You didn't. We were asking for members right up until the day that we assembled, because we felt we could have done with more members. And I'm on behalf of my task group, I do rebuff your critical comment.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to underline Councillor Seed's remarks because the task group was tasked with looking at the speed assessment process. And in that, I think they've done a good job. I have one suggestion to make, which is that frequently, in my experience, particular roads are the subject of recurring requests for speed assessments. And I wonder whether or not the council couldn't have a map which shows over time those roads which have already been assessed and a record of what the speed assessment was. Thank you, Chair.
I was looking for any other hands. Have we got any other hands? Anyone wish to speak on this report? No. Okay. Councillor Holder, I think you've. I don't know if there's anything you want to add. I don't think there's anything you need to say on this moment in time, is there? No. Okay. So I'm going to look at the move to the recommendation. So to endorse the report of the task group and refer it to the cabinet member for highways, street scene and flooding for a response at the committee's next meeting, which will be on the 3rd of September. Can I have a seconder to that? Mr. Wheeler?
Is it worth considering my suggestion, Jem?
I would have no difficulty in incorporating that as an additional recommendation. I think any attempt to put further detail or to, but it would have to be up to the cabinet member eventually to say yes, that could be produced. I wouldn't have thought it, given the number of speed limit assessments that we do, that would be a difficult job.
And to be fair, I have seen it done in my area of the same place twice over 10 years, so it's probably been forgotten or something. So yeah, so we're going to add that one in. I'm happy with that because.
Jerry.
Oh, Councillor Derek. Oh, I didn't see your hand, Derek. I'm really sorry. Come on in. On it.
I'm sorry. I'm on a very primitive form of communication, so I can only get sound. Basically, I just wanted to come back to Councillor Budden and just say that no process ultimately is going to be absolutely perfect. However, I think that we've made a very good stab at addressing some of what we saw are the elements that were missing in the current form of speed limit assessment. And I would welcome Councillor Budden to communicate with me, and perhaps we can look at means by which we can perhaps encourage any elements of those to be included in the future. But I would say that in the main, that we felt that we had delivered the main elements, which were elements in which we addressed the concerns of the local people, and that we were not, up to now, we haven't in our speed limit assessments really listened to the people who are actually impacted by the speed limit assessments. So I would say that this is a job, yes, but I think we've done a very good job, and thank you, Jonathan, for carrying this through. It may not be that we've reached the ultimate goal, but at this point in time, I think we've made a very good stab at it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Derek, I didn't see your hand. I was afraid, right? So going back to the second part of the recommendation that Councillor Jackson asked for, which was to add an additional recommendation is added so that the speed assessments are mapped and that the map is published. Okay, so all in favour of that? Anybody against? Councillor Budden, do you want that vote recorded, Mr. Budden? Yeah, okay, so right. Thank you then to that, Jonathan. Thank you for the great report. And I want to thank the speed assessment team, all of you that took part in that, because you're on your way, we're very near the end anyway. Okay, thank you. Task group updates. Oh, hang on, we got the climate one, haven't we? Apologies, who's taking that now? I know we are. I've broken my 2-hour rule as well, by the way. Graham, are you online? Yeah, you're going to do it. Oh, Graham, right, his picture come up. Right, so, okay. No, Councillor Murray. Whiz through.
Right, turn it on.
So Climate Emergency Task Group met on the 28th of June to consider the Council's developing tree and woodland strategy. Task Group has looked at this issue on several occasions in the past, making recommendations around tree planting and reforestation in its report of January 2021, and it's met with the Woodland Trust since then. Woodlands make good habitat, are flood mitigators, they're carbon sequesters, and they're an economic resource. Urban trees reduce noise, capture pollution and offer shade, whilst hedgerows provide shelter, food and migratory routes. We asked a number of questions which are set out in the report, but overall the new strategy is a welcome development. Task Group also met to consider the climate change audit report undertaken by the South West Audit Partnership, and Graham will report back in more detail at the next update on that. This is just to bring the Select Committee's attention that one of the recommendations of the audit was to review the task group's terms of reference. The task group is therefore likely to ask for some minor amendments to the terms of reference at the next Environmental Select Committee. And Graham's not here, but I can try and answer any questions, and Simon will be able to support anything I can't answer if there are any.
Any questions? Any questions for Pip? No. Okay. So, then we'll move rapidly into recommendations. That we note the update of the task group activity provided, and B, notes the Climate Emergency Task Group's draft forward work plan, which we see Appendix 1. All happy with that? All in favour? Okay. Right, so then we move to the forward work plan. You've all seen it. Can I invite any comments on that plan? Is there anyone? I know on the September the 3rd one, it could be, I don't think I go over 2 hours a day, and I'm 2 hours 6. It's going to be quite a long one on the 3rd of September, because we've got highways, annual report. I think we've got the grass cut in. So be prepared for a bit of a longer one. I don't think I'm going to be able to cut it, because I think it could be cut grass or flatten it or roll in it or do something, whatever we can. We'll fill some potholes in between now and then. So can I have a seconder to that, to approve the forward work plan? Can I have a seconder to that? All right, all in favour? Yeah. So that's done. Urgent items, I don't think there are any. So I'll close the meeting at 15:37, 2 hours and 7 minutes. The next meeting is 3rd of September. Thanks for all attending. And I did not think that Warminster one would take that long.